got two presentations this evening. We're going to kick off in a minute with Tony Taylor, who's going to do a cocktail stick dispenser at high speed, and you'll see what I mean when he actually starts his presentation. And then for the second half, we'll have a little break. And then for the second half, you've got me, and I'm talking about trunks and chunks, dealing with large wood bits. So without any more ado, if I can hand across to Tony.
Okay, well, as you've heard, I'm going to try to demonstrate the making of a cocktail stick dispenser. This is only a small thing, but it's got it's got 5 different little bits in it, and takes a while to make. I think it's a worthwhile thing because quite a lot of people seem to like them, and I've been successful in selling a few. And as I say, it's got 5 bits to it, so it takes a fair time to make. And I've found that in the end, the best way to cope with it is to speed the presentation up. That makes my turning look ever so much more slick than it normally is, which is a great advantage. So here we go. There you see the way it is. It's got to. What is particularly attractive is the way if it's made nicely, it slides together. Now we start with a piece of, in this case, a piece of cherry, and it's turned down to 60 millimeters diameter and about 7 inches long. We make a chucking tenon on each end, just as if you were making a box. You see, lack of preparation. I should have set the calipers right. There we go. Just make the tenon a little bit wider and use a screw chisel to make a dovetail. There we are. Same at the other end. I wish I could move this fast normally. Yes, you see, I picked up the wrong calipers. There we go. Right, now we've got to put in the chuck. It's convenient I find to keep the stem center in the chuck. It's quick to change over. There we are. Now we're going to mark off the part for the lid. And part that off. I think it's not very sharp. Anyway, there we go. Now I'm going to get out my Japanese saw. Quick and dirty saw, that is. Now 110 millimeters is about right for the body of the device. We'll start by cleaning up the top surface with a spindle gouge. Make a little dimple where we're going to drill it. Now we'll mark off 110 millimeters. Just start the parting off and take a little way. And we're going to put a small bead at the bottom. And for this, it's only a 3 millimeter bead, and it'd be quite difficult to do that. It'd certainly be very difficult for me to do it with a spindle gouge or a screw chisel. So I'm using a beading tool. It's the Ashley Isles beading tool. Rock it slightly side to side, and be sure to stop just as you meet the crest of the whatnot, otherwise you would lose the top. So that's the bead at the bottom of the object. Now we're going to, that's 60 millimeters diameter at the bottom. I'm going to reduce it to 40 millimeters at the top. Yeah. Now using a small roughing gouge, I'm using that to taper the body down to make a nice sort of lighthouse shape. And keep on going backwards further and further until you get to the bead, and be careful to protect the bead. Use a corner of the gouge to cut down to the bead. Nearly there. Right, so now we want a bead at the top as well to match. And we must cut the wood away with the spindle gouge to reveal the bead. Be very careful not to knock it off. If we knock the bead off, we'd be in trouble. That's using the gouge as a screw scraper. Not very conventional to use on a spindle, I know, but it seems to work quite well. Let's trim off the surface. That's a little catch. Playing back at double speed really does hide quite a lot of faults. It's excellent. Okay, there we are. You see most of the dust is going down the chute. Sand it, being careful to avoid the beads, otherwise you take those off very quickly. They don't need any sanding. Now it's already had I've jumped a bit there. It's had a coat of sanding sealer, and it's now being and it's now had some wax, and I'm just waxing it and finishing off the finish. Well, that's that's microcrystalline wax. I found very useful. It seems to be good at resisting handling, and it's a very simple and quick finish. Notice that I haven't used any Hampshire sheen or any such substance. Frankly, I've tried Hampshire sheen recently, and I haven't found it any particular advantage. I don't know. Perhaps I should be corrected in that. But here we are. Now we're hollowing it out, and I've jumped a bit because it's very boring drilling out this. But you see, I've got the Forstner bit mounted in an extender bar, because it wasn't quite long enough to get down into this. I want to drill it to within about 1 centimetre of the bottom. Be careful to hold on to the chuck when you withdraw the bit. If it comes loose, it's really rather frightening, and you can hurt your hand with it. There we go. I'm using compressed air to blow it clean. It's not necessary, but it does help. A little bit of soap on the Forstner bit certainly seems to make it heat up a bit less. Incidentally, this wood started off pretty dry. It's been seasoned for quite a long while, but as it is important to use seasoned wood, because otherwise you'll see later the piece that fits inside it will very easily jam if the wood changes shape subsequently. So make sure you use seasoned wood. We're nearly there. There we go. I'd marked as you see, I'd marked the drill stem. Right, that's the drilling. Now it's useful to sand out the inside because we want it nice and smooth, because we want the little cap that slides down the inside to slide nice and freely. So I mounted a piece of sandpaper on a rounded piece of rounded wood. Now we're ready to part off. I think I should sharpen that parting tool. Please ask questions if there's anything that is of interest goes along. Makes it less boring. Oh yes, this is where I make a bit of a mess with the so-called Japanese saw. I think I would have been better with my great big saw. What happened is I was not sawing at the narrowest part. It got there eventually.
Is that end grain orientation?
Oh yes, it's end grain. Yes, yes. Now I put it on a jam chuck, unnecessarily long, but it seems to be all right. To finish off the bottom. Let's make the bottom nice so woodturners can enjoy looking at it. There we are. Make sure it's slightly hollowed in the center, slightly dished. Make a couple of little decorating lines with the point tool. There we are. Sand it off quickly. Bit of wax on the bottom. Make sure you get it into the cracks. Put the cracks in the wax in the cracks. There we go. First part done. Now we make the lid. So that's the other half of that's the other bit of the stock mounted in the chuck. Clean up the surface. What precision. Now we must turn this down to match the diameter of the top. Best to mark it with the calipers. Make sure you touch the left hand point. Otherwise you'll be hitting the eye with the calipers. Use the beading parting tool to take off the bulk of the wood down to the right diameter. Much quicker than the using a gouge much quicker.
What speed are you turning that at, Tony?
I should think it's about 1500, I should think. Right, as it's a bit tapering, just straighten it up. Yes, do please ask questions because I'm sure there's of course there's always more than one way of doing this, and I'm sure some of you would have some good ideas about how it could be done better and more quickly. Right, so we've got that down to the diameter of the outside bead of the bottom. So now we can make a matching bead on this. And as you'll observe, I'm making a mistake because I suddenly realize in a minute that I've made the bead on the wrong end. But still, here we go. I'm going to start by drilling a central hole. We've got to make a hole for the dowel, a short piece of dowel to go in, and also for the hole for the finial to go in the top. So it's convenient to make the hole all the way through the lid. And the dowel goes in the bottom and the finial goes in the top. Using a brad point drill, make sure it centers well. Yes, I'm just realizing. So I want to make this where I'm cutting now the underside, and of course that's where the bead has got to be. So let's make another bead, and then we'll dispose of the first one in a minute. This has got to be, this fillet has got to be reduced to the diameter to just fit inside the hole in the base. There you go. Check that.
Is that a fishtail parting tool?
Yes, yes, that's right. Yes, I use that all the time. Seems to be very good. Yes, this is where I realise I put the bead on the wrong end. Still, there's always a way. Put the new bead on the bottom of the lid. Walk from side to side.
Is that an Ashley Isles bead?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It's a marvellous thing. Marvellous thing. It's got a different size on the other end. It's got a bigger one on the other end. This one's about 3 millimeters, and the other one's about 6 millimeters on the other end. Right, round it off the top, and use the detail gouge to cut in to reveal the bead, to sharpen the bead nicely. There you go. It's a silly thing to do. There we go. We'll put a little decorating line on the top in a minute. We want to very slightly dish the top, because otherwise when you fit the finial, you may find you left a little gap. So it's always a good idea to very slightly dish in the top. We're going to put a little decorating line on there. Right, now we can part that off. We'll better sand it and wax it first. If you part it off in your haste and forget to sand it, you get a bit stuck. I usually go through start with 180 and go through to 400. Not many questions. Now you see I'm breaking the rules and using a piece of cloth, because I suddenly realised I hadn't got any paper there. And but as long as you make sure that you keep the bulk of the cloth right out of the way, you're safe.
Is that cellulose sanding sealer or acrylic?
I always use cellulose sanding sealer. I've got acrylic, but I hardly ever use it. Now part that off, leaving that little fillet on to go inside the doings. I mean, just chamfering that lower edge so that it will drop in very easily. Right, part it off. This time I'm actually going to try and get it. Usually, sometimes I do this, it disappears down the suction tube. Right.
What sort of tolerance do you give the little fillet there, then, Tony?
You must make sure it will clear easily. It's a real nuisance if you find it jams when it doesn't. If it's slightly tight,
yeah.
Make sure it's free. There's no reason for it to be tight. Just finish that off very quickly. I put it in the jam chuck. You see, it's not easy to jam it when it's got a rounded top like that, but anyway, it sort of works. I think if you were trying to make these for profit, you'd be rather hard pressed because there's so many little bits to do in it. Mind you, Gary Rance would probably do it extremely quickly, and he probably could make them. Now we're going to make the inner little cup that holds the cocktail sticks. I'm taking a bit of plain wood. Don't know what it is, and you see it's just a square bit that I've gripped straight in the chuck. You don't need to round it and put a chucking space on it. Now we've got to reduce this to the diameter to slip nicely inside the base. And my experience is that you don't want to try to make it too snug a fit, because as sure as you do, it may fit very beautifully at first, and then you leave it for a few days and the wretched thing's jammed, and you've then got to get it out and reduce it. So inevitably the wood will change its shape a little bit when you bring it indoors. So make sure that the inner part is a reasonably loose fit inside. All right. This cup needs to be about 2 centimeters deep. If you make it too short, then you have trouble with the stick standing up in it when you raise them up. They're liable to all fall out. If you make it too deep, then the thing may not slide very easily in the base. Checking that to sure it fits. Now you want to drill out the center. This is a 25mm bit. These Forstner bits, I find that I've got a whole lot of different Forstner bits I bought at various times, and I must say most of them are pretty blunt and don't cut very well, and I almost always fall back on these TCT ones, these carbide tipped ones. They keep their edge beautifully. These came from Axminster. Axminster only make 3 sizes, though, unfortunately. But I've gradually been accumulating some bigger ones. Now that's 25mm isn't quite big enough, so I'm going to hollow it out a little bit more using a round skew chisel. Just push it in. Much better than a round one's very useful because it fits into the shape. If you try and use a square-sided one, it will inevitably keep tapering in. Right, get the drill out, that one out of the way. Now we will need to drill a hole in the bottom to fit a dowel, a little bit of dowel in. This is a 6mm brad point drill. Here we go. Now we need to part it off. Just checking the depth. Leave a few millimeters thickness at the bottom, about 5mm thickness at the bottom. Putting a little chamfer on the bottom edge, bottom corner, to help it to slide. Sand it. Don't generally wax it. I think the plain wood on plain wood seems to slide quite well. If you put wax on, there's just a danger that it might start sticking. Now, to mount the dowel in, put it in the Jacob's chuck. The idea being to make sure it fits straight and true into the base. And you see, I'm doing this before having parted the cup off. That's my head. Put a little bit of super glue on. Push it in. Then I decided to give it a tap because I wasn't sure that it was right in. Put the jack back to make sure it's straight. Here we go. Put a bit of accelerator. Now we can part it off. At the end of my presentation, Graham's going to show some that he's been making. He's made some lovely ones and much more imaginative than mine, I have to say. But he may have some useful ideas as to other ways of doing this. There we are. Now, I'd like to clean up the bottom of that. And happily, you can grip that neatly on the inner side of the jaws of the chuck. Just lightly, it only needs to be lightly gripped. A bit of accelerator there to make sure the super glue is really set. Let's turn that off. Now we're making the finial. It's a bit of ebony or ebony-like wood. I'll give you a closer view from right overhead this time. Hard stuff. Mark off the length that we're going to use. This is all very much a matter of taste, the shape and size of the finial. There aren't any particular rules to give. Just reducing this to the diameter I think will be appropriate. You see, the parting tool works much better, gets rid of the stock much more quickly than the gouge. Gouge doesn't seem, it's really quite hard work cutting ebony with a gouge. Right, let's just reduce that piece to a cylinder of what I think will be a sensible diameter. And again, marking off its length. Now we want to shape it, putting a bit of a nice sort of pear-shaped top. using a detail spindle gouge. I wish I could do it with a skew chisel. So much more impressive. But I find I get on much better with the fine spindle gouge. Now we get the tailstock out of the way. You have to be careful not to press very hard with the tailstock because it makes a dent in the wood, which is difficult to get rid of. Making a nice waist on this. I like a nice waist. Yeah. We're going to leave a little bird's beak just under the bulge. This is where my shake is rather difficult to cope with, but still.
Make a lovely chess piece.
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? A nice wood, lovely wood. Okay. Right, sample to sanding. Boring stuff, but still has to be done. As a matter of fact, I mean, when you make a finial like this, you can do a significant amount of the shaping with this, with the sanding at the end. If you haven't got it, don't worry if your work with the spindle gouge wasn't too precise. You can get rid of a lot of imperfections with the sanding. Shouldn't say that, should I? But that's the facts.
We all do it, Tony. I really like your sandpaper holder.
Yes.
I've never seen that before.
Haven't you? Oh, I thought that was very common practice. Yeah. Some people put magnets on the bottom, saves it falling on the floor. And
I've never thought of it.
And as long as you put them back in order, as you take them out, then it saves you a lot of groveling around.
I think that's a Gary Rance idea.
I think it is, yes.
Yeah.
It's a production turner's idea, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
We're getting there, and finishing up with some 1000 grit. Not often I use 1000 grit, but it's worth it on this ebony. That looks getting better. Now some wax. It's wonderful what the wax will do to this.
You miss out the sanding sealer on that. You go straight to wax.
It doesn't. I don't think there's much point on wood that's so dense as ebony. Really, I mean, it may be. You can do so. The trouble with putting anything like that on is you may blunt the nice sharp edge that you made. I mean, there's a nice sharp edge of the bird beak there, and it's amazingly easy to take the sharpness off when you start putting any sort of gunk on it. Very much so. If you're doing one of a plain wood and you want to ebonize it, then putting ebonizing lacquer on can easily blunt the edges. Go on, plus the two. Now decide. Oh yes, setting that to 6 millimeters. Turning a little spigot on the bottom. When you're doing this, make sure you make the bottom of the flange very slightly concave. Nothing worse than mounting the thing with glue and then finding that there's a slight gap between that and the piece below. There you are, I've got it. Finally part it off. I've decided I'll saw it off, I think, this time. So, a bit nervous of it getting lost in the shavings. Ah, yes, use a good old junior hacksaw, much better than Japanese saw. There we are, finished. I think that is the end. There we are. And
very nice.
Right, there it is, folks.
Fantastic.
So you can unshare now. How do I unshare?
Might be able to do that for you. Hang on a minute. There we go.
Well done.
That's it.
Well done.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tony. That was absolutely super.
Well done, Tony. Would you like to...
Gosh.
Shall I show you some of the ones I've been making?
Yes, please.
Hi. So, yeah, funnily enough, I've been making quite a few of these myself and experimenting with different shapes and different woods. I've got one which is laburnum.
Oh, that's nice.
And it's a lovely bit of wood and a sort of swan neck, sort of wasted shape. I agree with Tony, though. I've made a few of these over the years, and the problem that I've had is that when you sell them, sometimes if you make them a really nice fit, like this one has stayed in my workshop because it's it just slides in nicely, but when you sell them, like Tony says, the wood always, when it goes into a nice warm lounge, it tends to change shape, and they come back to you, say, oh, it doesn't work anymore. Oh dear. So here's one piece of ash, similar sort of shape, coloured with some stain, iridescent stain, quite a nice colour. Another one I made, sort of a cerise colour. Anybody see that all right?
Yeah.
Shocking.
Quite a tall finial on that one. Interesting piece of ash, which I sort of did as a barrel shape, and a sort of little stubby top. And this was, the finish was sort of that old vinegar in wire wool in vinegar. And it brings out the lovely dark colour of the oak. Quite nice finished bottom to that one. This one not quite so stable, but sort of upside down sort of shape, really. But
Nice. Very nice.
quite unusual.
Ah, that's lovely. They're lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. This piece of wood is lovely. This is a piece of satin. And similar shape to Tony's, and a little stubby top. So I've enjoyed making them. Been lovely. Hope you like them.
Yeah, very much so. Have you got a particular favourite wood, Graham, that you like to make them out of? Any that perhaps don't when you make them, they've not got the tendency to warp. Is there any particular wood that might?
Yeah, I mean the laburnum's a lovely wood. I really love laburnum, and a piece of branch is perfect for it. But they do move a bit afterwards. That's the problem with that one. A beech, I've had some problems with beech as well because I tend to dry it myself. I don't tend to think. I tend to make the carriers, the little cup that the sticks go in. I tend to make them out of beech, old chair legs and things, because that's nice, sort of dry, seasoned wood. But I do like the ash. Some of the ash ones I've actually burnt the when I've sanded it down. I've burnt it with a blowtorch to highlight the grain. Probably can't see that quite very well, but the grain does come through quite nicely, and even though the colour's on it, and
that's nice. Yeah,
so I quite like working with ash. We'll have to see how they this batch actually sort of work. When I've not made them quite as tight as I used to. They don't go in so slowly, but they still work.
Have you got a good market for them? Because you made a number, you must think they're popular.
Well, I think you're right. They do sell well, but the difficulty is, what do you sell them for, Tony? Because they do take quite a while, as you suggested. I do enjoy
it's not a way of making a living, that's for sure.
No, that's right. I love making them because, as you said, there are so many different elements to them, and you can just, if you get fed up with one bit, you can just go on and make a few of the other bits, and I don't make them like a production like perhaps Gary would, but I just enjoy making them. And but I don't know. I think you've got to sell them for £30 really to justify the content of time and wood.
Yes, I thought it wouldn't. My market was about 25, but I think 25 or 30 would have to be it. I mean, you can't possibly make a profit at that, so to speak.
No, it's all about enjoyment.
It's nice, as you say, they're nice to make, and you can't just leave them hanging around, can you?
No, that's right.
They're a very nice idea. I'm wondering as a challenge if I could make the top and the spindle down the centre in one piece.
Yeah.
Horrible waste of wood.
Yeah.
It would be, but it'd be a nice challenge to turn a spindle 200 mil long.
Yeah. Oh, you can do it. You can do it. I made the dowel for one of them by hand, but it's silly when you can just go and buy a yard of 6mm dowel for practically nothing.
Yeah, but think of the glue that you would save, Tony.
Oh, that's great. Right, if we haven't got any more questions, I suggest we have a 5-minute break, and then we'll resume, and I'll I'll tell you all about trunks and chunks. So if you feel free to unmute, recharge your glasses, put the kettle on or whatever, and we'll resume in about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.